For the Hill in Washington, D.C., and a political analyst for news radio station KNX in Los Angeles. My company, Bannon Communications Research, polls for progressive issue groups, labor unions, and Democrats. For more info on my firm, check me out at twitter.com/Brad Bannon. Mondays on Deadline DC, I talk to the people and players behind the politics and policies that drive our great nation forward. This week, we have two guests. In the first half hour, Tacoma Mayor Victoria Woodards, who is the first vice president of the National League of Cities, joins us to discuss American assistance relief to the beleaguered people of Ukraine. Then in the second half hour, Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA, joins us in the second half hour to talk about the latest news, which in this case is that Twitter has accepted Elon Musk's bid, $43 billion bid, to buy the company. Anyway, our guest in this segment is the mayor of Tacoma, Washington, and the first vice president of the National League of Cities, Victoria Woodards. The National League of Cities is the voice of American cities, towns, and villages, representing more than 200 million people. The National League of Cities works to strengthen local leadership, influence federal policy, and drive innovative solutions. Their website is NLC.org, and the Twitter handle is League of Cities. Mayor Woodward's handle is Woodwards, that's WOODARDS, the number 4, Tacoma, TACOMA. Welcome to Deadline DC, Mayor Woodwards. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you today.
It's great to have someone from the Pacific Northwest. Actually, we had a guest last week from the Pacific Northwest, so it's 2 weeks in a row. And it's a lovely part of the country. And now that the pandemic is winding down, I hope to get back out there again soon because it's a wonderful country.
We look forward to welcoming you back out here, Brad, and it's getting more beautiful by the day.
Great. Let's talk. First thing I want to talk about is I would like to. Tacoma is a sister city with a city in Ukraine, Bovary. Could you talk about your the relationship between Tacoma and Bovary in Ukraine?
Sure. So we've been sister cities with Brovary since 2017, so not a very long time. But in that short period of time, we've established a very strong relationship. We have a church here in Tacoma. Pastor Peter, who now has passed away, but started the relationship with Brovary and sent us a letter, and we began to work with him and his congregation, and then very quickly established a sister city relationship just because we have such a large Ukrainian population. And so we established that relationship and have already done a lot with that sister city. I had an opportunity already to visit our sister city in Ukraine. We worked with them. As we surplused an ambulance here in Tacoma, we raised money to purchase the ambulance, and then we worked with our port to have the ambulance shipped to Germany. And then our sister city committee's chair met the ambulance in Germany and drove it to Brovary, which later I got to go, and we got to dedicate the ambulance, as well as we sent over several of our firefighters to actually train the Brovary firefighters on how to use the ambulance. And Brad, I can tell you that especially during this time, as difficult as the time is, it's hard to say that something was heartwarming, but I want you to know it made us feel really good when we actually saw a picture of that ambulance being used during the war. And it just reminded us about how important it was that we took that step with them.
And let me ask you this: when were you in Ukraine?
I believe it was August of 2019.
Yeah, okay. And just to give our viewers and listeners some context, where in Ukraine is Bovary?
That look now, see, Brad, I knew you'd get me with one of those questions. I believe it is on the. Let me double check because I don't want to give
Okay.
you the wrong information about where it is. But they do have an Air Force. They do have a not Air Force base, but they do have a military base in Brovary. As a matter of fact, Brovary was one of the first cities that was hit because they have a military base.
Yeah,
But then,
that's why I asked to
yeah,
find out if it was in a
yeah,
war zone.
yeah. So it was hit, but then probably just about 3 weeks ago, I got notice that Russia had pulled out of Brovary.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and
Well,
so
okay.
so the city was okay again. We have been in touch with we get weekly updates. So we've been in touch with the mayor of Brovary. So we get weekly updates from them. I haven't gotten the one for this week, but hope to hear that things are going, obviously, Brad, as well as they can go during this time.
What can you tell us about the people you met in Ukraine when you were there?
You know, it's really interesting. We have 15 sister cities, and I was a council member before I was mayor. And always loved the sister city program, loved the cultural exchanges. But I think when you become mayor and you actually get to visit your sister city, I've had the honor to visit 5 of our sister cities so far. Um, it just makes a difference. And for a person who's from Tacoma who didn't have an opportunity to travel a lot as a young girl growing up here, to be able to go to those 5 sister cities, especially Brovary, um, to actually meet the people. But I had an opportunity to spend time with the mayor. What I found is that the common bond of music is something that unites us all. But they're just a city that's very much committed to wanting the best for its community and those who live there. Had an opportunity to visit an arts school while I was there and see young people dance together. It was really cool. They do ballet on roller skates, which is something I've not seen before, but had an opportunity then to go to an orphanage, which was surprising the number of orphan children in Ukraine. So I had an opportunity to spend an afternoon at an orphanage, spend a lot of time with the mayor and their city council. They have a fairly large city council. But what I just found is, and I will say this, much like a lot of other countries, Ukrainian food is amazing. And much like even here in America or in other countries, sitting down for a meal together is incredibly important and builds relationships for them. And it's a place, in my opinion, between the food and the music, where all of the potential barriers that we think separate us are actually removed, and we find out how much we really have in common.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this question.
Sure.
What was it like? What did you think when you first heard and saw footage of the Russian invasion? What was your reaction?
My heart broke. I was scared. I was worried. um, we met a lot of incredible people. And I would venture to say that I'm a person who quickly uses the word family, but it just felt like family. That's how it feels like every sister city we went to. But when we left, I felt like I had family. And I immediately reached out to a couple of people who I still stay in touch with from the time we went to Brovary just to check on them. But I was scared. Um, Here in Washington, the weekend immediately after, the weekend immediately after the war began, we had a statewide service, um, uh, uh, and there were probably over 3,000 people who attended that service, plus elected officials from across the state came to support the Ukrainian community here. And then a week after that, or a week and a half after that, I went to our local Slavic center
Mm.
and worshiped with them as well. Just very, very scared, very worried about their families. And so for me, it just became that same sense of worry and fear for them about, as Brad, as you well know, this senseless war that is happening.
Yeah, really, it is senseless. We're going to take a break now. Our guest in this half hour is Mayor Victoria Woodwards, who is also the first vice president of the National League of Cities and she is going to come back and discuss with us the Sister Cities program and what the National League of Cities is trying to do to help the beleaguered residents of Ukraine. We'll be back right after these messages.
I want to get back to seeing my grandbabies every Sunday and smothering them with big hugs and kisses.
I want to get back to football games with my boys.
Oh,
I want
no.
to get back to feeling
You know what,
and
Mark?
touching,
I'm so used to
connecting
it.
with
I'm
the
either
people around me.
Woodwards or
I wanna get back to family
Woodard.
dinners.
Like they either
My
take out the
grandma's
S or
mac
throw in
and
a
cheese.
W.
I
It
want to
doesn't
get
even
back
bother
to
me.
real grocery shopping.
What did I
Taking my
say, Mark?
time, walking down every aisle, smelling the tomatoes and
Okay,
melons.
say that again, please.
Having a free sample or two,
Woodard.
or three.
COVID-19
Okay.
has changed how
Okay.
we live and how we feel. But now, there are
Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Our guest in this half hour is Mayor Victoria Woodards. She is the mayor of Tacoma, Washington, which is a sister city, Bovary, in Ukraine. She is also the first vice president of the National League of Cities, which is trying to help the beleaguered residents of Ukraine who are under the grave threat of Russian invasion and occupation. Mayor, let me ask you this. You said Tacoma donated an ambulance to the city of Bovary, and you said you've seen film of it and pictures of it in action.
I have. Yeah. Someone sent me just a video of it driving through the streets of Brovary, and I just, like I said, that felt really good. But I would say, in addition to the ambulance that we donated, and that was a couple of years ago, we also, our sister city committee also raised money and sent money over to Brovary to make sure that we were supporting them, and we're still raising money and sending money over to Brovary.
Yeah, in the videos, what again, what is the situation in Bovary? It was attacked, but is it safe now?
It is not quite all the way safe. It was my understanding in the last report that Russia had pulled out of Brovary. I haven't heard anything to the contrary at this point. So I'm assuming that it is safer, but I don't know that there's a city in the Ukraine that is actually safe at this time.
Yeah, well, that's a good point.
It's my understanding last time I heard is that Russia had pulled out of Brovary.
Have you had the opportunity to talk to any of the people you met when you were there?
I have not. The few people that I reached out to, the easiest way for us to reach out was over Facebook, and I've not been able to reach them. But I also understand that there's been some issues being able to communicate with those in Ukraine through Facebook. So hopefully I will hear soon. My hope is that not hearing is good news. That's what I want to believe, because otherwise I will worry to death. But obviously, continuing to lift them up in prayer and hope for the best, and then continue to support them any way we can. Brad, as the first vice president of the National League of Cities, we also had an opportunity at our conference in March to actually talk to the mayor of Lviv. And I want to tell you that in that room of 50 plus board members all sitting around, listening to him describe what was happening in his city, and listening to his resolve in fighting for Lviv, there wasn't a dry eye in the house just to see the strength and presence of this mayor.
Mayor, we have to take a short break now to bring back our radio listeners. But when we return, we'll have more of our interview with Mayor Victoria Woodards, who is of Tacoma, Washington, who was the first vice president of the National League of Cities. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. We're talking about the crisis in Ukraine in this half hour. Our guest is the mayor of Tacoma, Washington, Victoria Woodards, who is also the first vice president of the National League of Cities. Tell me again about the conference video you did with the mayor in Ukraine.
Yes, so we were at our Congressional Cities Conference, which happens every March in DC, and it was during our board meeting that we were the mayor of Lviv, Mayor Andy Anderly Sandoval. And so we had an opportunity to talk to him. Lviv is the fifth largest city in Ukraine. And so it was just very powerful to hear from him. And I think, as I was saying on the live stream, his presence, his resolve, his resiliency made us all very proud. And we wanted to do whatever we could to support. So one of the things we did immediately after that conversation is to pass a resolution as a board in full support of Ukraine and the government officials there who are living through this very difficult time.
Yeah, well, let me ask you, let's go back to the National League cities. I assume other cities, other members of the National League of cities are trying to do the same thing that you are in Tacoma. Can you tell us a little bit
Absolutely.
about what some of the other cities are doing?
I don't have all the details, Brad, and I wish I did, but I would tell you. So I know that here in Washington, city next to ours, Federal Way, just adopted Ravine as a sister city in Ukraine. But through the National League of Cities and Sister Cities International have a very close relationship. So we're working very closely with them to answer any needs that they may have or to support any needs that they may have as a national organization. As it relates to sister cities across the country, there are quite a few other, I know that there are quite a few other cities that have sister cities in Ukraine, but don't have that list in front of me at this time.
Okay. Let me ask you this. I'm sure you've watched the news shows and you see the carnage in Ukraine.
Mhm.
And I was watching some film of devastation in Ukraine the other night, and I thought to myself, do you think Americans are going to get tired of this? Do you think they'll stay committed to helping Ukraine in its struggle against the Russians, or are Americans going to get tired of seeing this footage and they're just going to move on to something else? Do you think there's public commitment among Americans to stay the course?
Brad, I have to believe that there is there. I mean, I will admit that America's had its share of issues the last couple of years, obviously with COVID and everything else that's been happening. And I know that people are growing weary and tired, and just our own resiliency during the time that we've been going through. But I will say this: what I know about Americans, and that is that we are an empathetic community. We are a compassionate country. And so I think I have to believe and want to believe that we'll stay the course. That we will hang in there and support them as until it's over. At least that's my hope. But everybody I talk to in my own city, as we talk about the issue, there continues to be a ton of support for our Ukrainian brothers and sisters.
Okay, since you mentioned that, there are a lot of other issues that I'm sure concern your constituents in Tacoma and concern other Americans. You mentioned one of them, COVID. How is Tacoma doing? I'm sure it went through a lot during the COVID epidemic, like other American communities did. How is Tacoma doing now?
We are coming out of COVID like every other city. We are not unlike any other city in this country. I will say one of the things that I always tend to be extremely grateful for, and that is that having a governor who really focused on statewide mandates as opposed to putting that in the hands of each city. And so I think that helped us come through, in my opinion, a little bit better. We all kind of stuck together and had the same rules most of the way. But I would say that Tacoma is coming back. We are still dealing with, homelessness as an issue that was exacerbated by COVID. We are dealing with the increases in crime as we are seeing across the country. And so we are seeing the economic hardships that are plaguing our community. But I think that we are focused. I mean, I'll be honest, the ARPA funding, the American Rescue, being able to fill some of those gaps and provide additional services when they're needed have been extremely helpful for us. And I think my goal is that we come out better than we were before.
Okay. Are there any COVID restrictions in Tacoma now?
Not at this time.
Okay, well, that's good news.
Yeah.
That's certainly good news. Let me ask you another question. The president was in Washington State on Friday, and he talked about the infrastructure law that his infrastructure law that he proposed and was passed by Congress. Will Tacoma benefit from the fruits of the infrastructure bill that was passed?
Absolutely, we will, and we need to. I can tell you, much like every city, town, and village across America, we have failing infrastructure in some of our bridges and some of our roads. And so this is a great opportunity for us. And so I actually had the opportunity, Brad, to actually be on the White House lawn when he signed the infrastructure bill. And I can tell you, as I talk to mayors across this country and council members as the first vice president of the National League of Cities, there is a lot of hope for our cities, towns, and villages because of the infrastructure bill.
Okay, well, that's certainly good news. And by the way, if I do get out there, and again, I love it out in the Pacific Northwest, I hope to go down. I'm a great fan of minor league baseball, so I'd love to go to a Rainiers game.
You know what, Brad? Before I became mayor for a year, I worked at the Tacoma Rainiers as their community outreach director. So it's a great place, great field, and they even convert it now to soccer. So you can see a soccer game or a baseball game in the same stadium.
Yeah, I've always been fond of minor league baseball. I went to a Rainiers game. That was years ago. I'd like to go see another one. I feel a fondness for minor league baseball because my mother and father met at a minor league baseball game. So it's in my blood, literally.
That's pretty special, Brad.
Mayor Woodards, thank you very much for joining us on Deadline DC, and perhaps you should come back sometime and give us a progress report.
I would love to do that, Brad. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Okay, our guest in this half hour was Mayor of Tacoma, Victoria Woodards. She is also the first vice president of the National League of Cities, and she joined us today to discuss the sister city relationship between Tacoma and Bovary in the Ukraine, which is a focus of the Russian attack and invasion. But fortunately, the Russians have backed off, at least temporarily. So I want to thank the good citizens of Tacoma and the mayor for aiding the citizens of Bovary, and hopefully better times will be on the way. We'll be back with more of Deadline DC after these messages.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I gotta tell you, I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too, but I'm glad we are.
Love has no labels, and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and life experiences come together through conversation, and it feels good.
Wow, your story is so...
interesting?
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
For many people, the animals they adopt and love become more like family members than pets. We have deep relationships with cats, dogs, parrots, goats, horses, and other fellow critters who at least pretend to love us back, providing comfort and joy all around. Sadly, though, life for all of us animals is a spin around the wheel of fortune, so illness and injuries happen. That's why one of the most valued members of every community are the staffers in our local veterinarian offices. Practically all vets, nurses, technicians, and support staff are there chiefly because they love animals and get personal satisfaction from providing care for them. When I say they are there, I not only mean 9 to 5, but this group of independent health providers are committed to being there when needed, including off hours and days off, for animal misfortune and suffering don't go by clocks and calendars. Local practitioners also try to be there for low-income people, offering deferred payment plans and even discounted fees so their animals can get the treatment they need. But wait, sound the ambulance sirens. Something is going horribly wrong. This venerable profession has recently been collapsing into a corporate model of Wall Street-owned chains. They are monopolizing markets, reducing staff, gutting service, and prioritizing the love of money over the love of animals. It's not uncommon these days for frantically worried customers to bring an ill or injured pet into their old reliable vet office, only to find it has quietly come under chain ownership, is understaffed, and is unwilling to accept the patient, forcing a desperate scramble to find emergency care, often out of town. This is Jim Hightower saying the same profiteering corporate mentality that has proven disastrous for human health care is now rapidly locking down pet care, and that's an act of animal cruelty.
Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Our guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, the editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. She is the star of stage, screen, and social media. The website for Politicus is POLICUSUSA.com. The Politicus Twitter handle is POLITICUSUSA. And Sarah's Twitter handle is Politicus Sarah. Welcome back to Deadline DC, Sarah. We're very pleased to have you back on.
I'm so glad.
When news breaks, we fix it here on Deadline DC, and the big news today is that apparently Twitter has accepted Elon Musk's bid of $43 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars, to buy the company. What's your first reaction to this, Sarah?
Well, I have two. One is business-wise, what a bad decision on Twitter's, shareholders and the board's decision. I'm not going to maintain that value after a few years of conservative, chasing a lot of people away, which we've seen with so many other social media outlets. Once they let this kind of hate take over and the conspiracies, people don't want to hang around. But the other thing is that it's going to turn into a conservative manosphere, and what that means is just horrific abuse being piled on anyone who doesn't agree with them. And the people who get picked on the most, of course, are always people of color. Women of color get the most abuse, Jewish people, LGBTQ people, anyone who doesn't agree with them politically and is from a marginalized group will be targeted. And it was like this before. Twitter wasn't always the nice place it is today, and I say that kind of sarcastically because a lot of people still complain about it. But it used to be a place where, I know that I got so many gang rape threats, threats of being, they were going to hunt me down and kill me. And Twitter would say that's not a violation of our terms of service. And I even had law enforcement people come on my timeline and say, you need to report this. This is a violation of the law. But no one back then did it. It was like the internet was the Wild West. Even just a few years ago, there weren't really, agencies regulating. Law enforcement didn't understand how to deal with it. People are anonymous. There's so many layers here that allow this kind of horrific abuse. But there are studies showing that when you allow that kind of stuff to go on, it silences people's voices. And Twitter's supposed to be a public sphere. That's how it's used right now, to share information and talk about our ideas. And Elon Musk, keeps saying we need free speech. What does that mean? How are people the only people being silenced are people lying about an election, plotting violence and domestic terrorism against this country, and people who are trying to kill other people with lies about COVID cures and, medication that doesn't work, that can be deadly.
Okay. My guess is what most people know Elon Musk is that he is a gazillionaire. He builds electric cars, and he went to space. So my question to you is, what do we know about Musk that will give us some sense of how he's going to run Twitter? You seem to be very fearful of his taking ownership of the social media site. What do we know about him that makes you nervous?
Well, and I want to clarify, I already know what I'm going to do. I've already been thinking about this, so I'm more afraid for other people. I've been down this road a number of times, but what we know about him is, number one, he's not that great of a businessman, and his company, Tesla, has had systemic accusations of sexism and racism that have not been resolved. His very focus that he's been going on the last couple months about how Twitter isn't open to free speech is a lie. And the only people who are saying stuff like that are people who want to say things that shouldn't be said in the public sphere. You shouldn't be able to walk up to somebody in the town hall or in, your local Starbucks and say, hey, I'm going to gang rape you and come to your house and kill you. But this is the kind of thing that because we see the kind of abuse that's still being, if you want to see what Twitter still allows under these new, happier guidelines that will soon go away, no doubt, you have to look, just look at Kamala Harris and Joy Reid and the kind of abuse that is hurled at them just relentlessly, so that they end up trending. And, and it's a lot of it is a weaponization of memes and sexualization and violence in pictures. And I've had that done to me. It's very disconcerting to have someone send you a photo of somebody being horrifically attacked with your face put on the photo. So, I don't understand. Like, if that's not where he's taking it, then what is his point? Why did he buy it? Everything actually is working better on Twitter than it has for a long time. As soon as they kicked Donald Trump off, Twitter got a lot better. There are better stories being shared, voices are being amplified of people who normally get drowned out. And that should be what we want. We want to unify not just our country, but the whole world. We want to be able to have a dialogue with people without being trolled to such an extent that people are going to leave. And that's what always happens, is that those people who are targeted silence. So they're going to silence those people.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that bothers me about this is, I don't know, that there's something obscene about $43 billion. There's just, I guess you have the situation where you have, you know, these people like Musk who have billions of dollars to throw around, while most people are trying to, having a tough time coming up with the money to fill the gas tanks. I don't know. It just seems to me this is too much. Now, what do you think? Is just Musk out to control the world and figures the best way to do it is through Twitter? Why do you think he's making this deal? I guess he thinks he can make a lot of money, but it seems to me that he's already dominated the ionosphere in a lot of ways. Now, what do you think's behind this?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, I haven't spoken to him directly. I don't have any idea what's going on in his head. But if I look at this objectively, there's parts of him, of course, he is smarter than Donald Trump, but there's parts of him that have this kind of overblown ego and need to control things. And so it makes sense that that all of the journalists and all of the news people hang out on Twitter. And if you want to influence the culture, that's where you need to be, and you need to have your voice heard. So that's why he bought it. There's no other it's not going to make money in the long run. Like every social media company, they all, end up kind of petering out. I know these guys don't want to believe that, but if you look at them, they do, or they have to go in a different direction. Like you look at Reddit, they kind of took away their focus on news when things were getting really ugly with all the white supremacy and all the stuff that was going on. They just tamped that out of the algorithm and went in a different direction. So the money isn't to be made doing what he seems to want to do with it.
Yeah, it just seems, and again, I guess the other thing that's scary is you have these social media sites and you have Twitter and Facebook and whatever else, and they're back. You have with Amazon, and it's just crazy, all this money that I just think it has an intimidating effect on people when they see stories about all this money being thrown around, and I'm not sure it's good. It just seems to me that you have a few. I was going to say guys, but Jeff Bezos and now Musk, who have incredible amounts of power, and it just, I don't know, there's something scary about it. I don't think it's good for democracy, but we will see. We're going to go to a break now so we can, for our radio listeners. But we're going to stay with our viewers on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Our guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, who is the editor-in-chief of Politicus. We were talking about the Musk acquisition of Twitter in this segment. In the next segment, we're going to talk about what I call GOP Freak Week. It seems to me all the GOP freaks were coming out of the woodwork this past week. Marjorie Taylor Greene, we're back to January 6th, the abortive coup attempt. We're going to talk about all of that when we get back with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon and Sarah Jones from Politicus USA.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on.
Mark,
and know we'll get.
Can you play the audio now on Marjorie Taylor Greene? Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. This broadcast of Deadline DC is brought to you by my political polling company, Bannon Communications Research, which polls for progressive issue groups, labor unions, and Democrats. We're going to talk about GOP Freak Week in this segment with Sarah Jones, but let's start with audio from Marjorie Taylor Greene in from her testimony in her sedition trial.
From DC on the 6th.
I don't recall.
And who put it on your calendar?
I don't know.
Somebody on your staff, I take it?
I have no idea. I don't know. I do not recall that, no. I don't recall. I don't remember. I don't think so. I don't recall the exact days. I don't think so. I don't recall that at all. I don't know. I don't recall That was the video, but I don't recall.
That was Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. She was testifying in a trial this week, and the trial is about her disqualification from the congressional ballot in Georgia because she aided and abetted the attempted coup on January 6th. And a judge now is is holding a trial to determine whether her support of the abortive coup disqualified her from running for re-election.
What's your emergency?
Our guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, who is editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. It seems to me last week the Republicans just went crazy. And it can't be good news when the face of the Republican Party is Marjorie Taylor Greene and her ridiculous testimony or lack of testimony in her sedition trial last week. With the help of the Biden administration, our NATO allies, we're helping the people of a fledgling democracy in Ukraine resist the invasion and occupation of their capital, Kyiv. Here in the United States, we've successfully resisted an armed invasion of the capital by a violent right-wing terrorist aided and abetted by Putin's puppet, Donald Trump, and his Republican cronies like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Republican threat to Ukraine persists, as does the fight for freedom, democracy here in the United States. Republicans threaten democracy here with their fantasies about the illegitimacy of Joe Biden's presidential victory, restrictions on the right to vote, and the limitations on freedom of women to make choices about their own bodies. It's up to Democrats and all patriotic Americans to aggressively defend democracy and fight tyranny here and abroad. Our guest in this half hour again is Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. Sarah, we just heard a clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene's testimony in her ballot trial, her sedition trial. Okay, we're going to return with our radio audience right after this break. We're back with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Our guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus. Sarah, we just heard a clip from the sedition trial, that's what I'd like to call it, of Marjorie Taylor Greene, U.S. representative from Georgia. It inspired a lot of drinking games, have a blast every time she said, "I can't recall." What's your take on her testimony or lack of testimony, Sarah?
Well, I actually wrote an article comparing her to Nixon because Nixon had that, the infamous "I don't recall." And I thought, this is what you see with somebody who's so afraid of knowing that their testimony will lead to perjury or to a referral to higher legal authorities if she told the truth. So she was trying to walk a fine line. I think we know now that she wasn't telling.
Does anybody say Marjorie Taylor Greene and truth in the same sentence?
I think it's important to point out, first of all, as you said, this is the week of freaks, but none of this is normal. What we are seeing, and we're being bombarded on all sides, including what your point about Elon Musk. We're being bombarded with this takeover of our country, and the people with money are taking over all the spaces where we can have discussions about democracy. So Republicans, they've stopped trying to win elections by appealing to voters, and now there is just a relentless pursuit to power through the delegitimization of the democratic process. That's what we are seeing. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I thought, she looked less brash and sure of herself than she usually does, but that isn't really saying much because she has that special brand of willful ignorance with the feverish kind of extremist true believer energy that comes off of her. She really isn't qualified. Even if she hadn't participated in this insurrection, I don't recall I don't know who put this on my calendar. I don't know who posted that video of me saying these things. I don't know that there is video of that. All of that, they're calling Joe Biden. They're saying he has dementia, and this is how they are. Kevin McCarthy just, denied something, and then Rachel Maddow rolls out the tape within hours of him saying exactly what he just said he never said. So these are very dishonest people who have an agenda, and I think it's very clear that they're deliberately deceiving people.
Well, let me ask a couple questions. I was watching some of that testimony of Marjorie Taylor Greene on C-SPAN or whatever it is. And I mean, her testimony was so ridiculous. She couldn't remember anything about anything. And then the attorney showed her tweets where she called, supported the abortive Capitol coup on January 6th. She praised the people who occupied the Capitol. And, my first question is, does it matter? You said this is not normal, but is this becoming the new normal? I mean, it's just crazy. Last week you had Marjorie Taylor Greene. You had Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, who said that he had not asked Trump to resign on January 6th, but then two enterprising reporters produced audio of him doing exactly that. This is the face the Republican Party is showing the nation. And, sometimes I wonder if this is like the new normal and people accept this crazy. I don't know. And I guess, well, first of all, I was thinking, if Marjorie Taylor Greene gets disqualified from the ballot in Georgia because of the support of the, sedition, and that's what January 6th was. It was treason, rebellion, and sedition, in my opinion. Aren't they just going to elect some other nutball in that congressional district in Georgia who'll be just as crazy?
Well, first of all, I don't think she's going to be taken off the ballot. I mean, that looks very unlikely to happen. The judge, is a little and not seeming to grasp the larger issues from what I saw, but very difficult. Has to go to, the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who's being primaried by a Trump-backed person. So he has a reason, to try to get in good with those people. So I'm not seeing a lot of hope that is going to happen, but absolutely, I lived in Georgia for a while. The amount of, and her district, much worse than where I lived, but we're living in very divided times. That's an understatement. One side has become a cult. The other side is at risk, and nobody really seems to be doing anything about that. And I think that your point about this becoming normalized is really what I would love to highlight, because we can go through all these crazy details that just came up today. Just today, this new barrage of text showing that the House Republicans and members of Trump's inner circle were all involved in January 6th. A domestic terrorist attack is what it's been labeled. It's also sedition and treason, in my opinion. I don't know why people don't say that. But I also wonder, where is the upset? Where are the people protesting and standing up for this? And it's, here we are. You look at that Virginia election that you and I talked about so much when it was going on, and in the middle of all this, you're going to elect another Trump person, and you're going to fall for the story that this guy is a moderate. I fear for our country right now. And then to top all of that off, the large conglomerates that own many of these social media companies are trying to silence news like our publication in a variety of ways that is, I think we're looking at a time when you're only going to hear certain voices talking about this stuff. And I don't think, honestly, that we hear the way things really are. I think there's way too much attempt at balance. And by balance, then it's to try to make these two sides equal when the two sides aren't equal. And right now, what needs to be discussed of the utmost priority is what happened on January 6th. Why are these people still in office? And how are we going to save our democracy?
Well, it seems to me last week the Republicans put their worst face forward with all the attention on, Kevin McCarthy's lies, Marjorie Taylor's lies, and that's what they are. Their memories aren't that bad. I'm sorry, and but at the same time, Americans are very unhappy. They are very angry about inflation. They're angry about crime and immigration. The president's job rating is, hovering at 40%. Is the Republican crazy that's going on enough to make Americans think twice about putting these people in control of the House of Representatives or the Senate, or is their anger about the direction of the country so intense they're going to basically overlook this crazy and let these people run the U.S. House of Representatives?
Well, this is a good question, and we just saw this happen in France. They have a new sort of version of Fox News, which is driven, and that's why Le Pen did as well as she did. And we see the same thing happening here. What is going to happen? Instead of talking about January 6th, they're talking about Mickey Mouse and Mr. Potato Head and how liberals, want to come and tell your kids what to do and are teaching them about being transgendered in third grade, which is not happening anywhere. So all of that's their focus, and they fearmonger so much because, of course, when you're not actually legislating for people, it's very easy to have a unified message to run on, which is whatever the culture war issue is, and then they have all of their media outlets push that nonstop, and it seeps into the mainstream, and then people vote on that. All of which goes back to my complaint about the way that that journalism is handled. I'm not talking about individual journalists. I have the utmost respect for individuals. I'm talking about what comes down from on high about being, fake balance, about making two sides seem equal.
Okay. Well, I hope you mentioned the French presidential election. French President Macron beat a Donald Trump clone by a fairly decisive margin, pretty close to 59 to 41. And I certainly hope that means that cooler heads will prevail in the United States also, although I'm not so sure. I certainly hope we do. That's it today for Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I want to thank our guest in this segment, Sarah Jones, the editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. I also want to thank our first guest, Mayor Victoria Woodards of Tacoma, who's also the first vice president of the National League of Cities. Leslie will be back tomorrow, so be sure to watch and listen to her. Be safe and be strong, and tune back in to Deadline DC next Monday.